All right, Polly. 30 seconds until cheese. Also, the live stream. 30, 29, 28, 27, 26, 25, wait, 24, 23, 22, 21, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Get it? Yeah, okay. All right. Everybody gets a live stream. Everybody gets a live stream. Well, yeah, okay, so that was Polly making perhaps her last guest appearance. I really should make a proper like 30-second countdown thing with the logo and like cool music and keep it professional like we do with the actual magazines and books that we do. But for now, you get to see a little dog vibrate with cheese lust as we get ready to do a live stream. Tonight is the final Friday, final evening of the crowdfund for Sometime Lofty Towers by David C. Smith. It wraps up tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Would have been noon, but Backer Kid is based on the West Coast, and sometimes I mess up the time zone conversion, so it'll be 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. Yeah, for now I'm doing the classic. We're doing a bit of a waffle for a couple minutes so people can actually get in the door and come to the live stream. Please don't be shy and sound off in the comments and stuff. Because we do encourage enthusiastic participation in the chat tonight. If you all have a fun comment you want to make, or if you have a question you'd like us to discuss, please don't be shy. Meanwhile, the crowdfund has been doing pretty okay. We funded relatively early in the crowdfund. This book is happening. And beyond that, yesterday, I was delighted to have us unlock the first stretch goal, which is spray color edges. So yeah, but what color they're going to be? Well, I actually personally do not know. I set up a poll on the crowdfund, very easy to find, where you guys can choose between a pale gold, a crimson red, and what I call a paperback purple, kind of an ode to the classic Lancer paperback purple, if you know what that is. Yeah, and the way BackerKit works is if I set it so that you can't see the results, I can't see the results until it's all over. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to find out what color the book is going to be on the edges of the pages tomorrow, and only backers can vote. So if you want to have a say in that, if you want to actually like shape what this book is going to be in its final form, please back the crowdfund. It'll be a push, but I think we could do it. I think we could get the next stretch goal, which is custom calligraphy, like drop cap initials. And that's a lot of words jammed together. Basically, what it means is, when you open a book and you get that nice, big, fancy first letter at the beginning of each chapter, that's an initial. And drop cap is kind of the style of just like a big, fancy letter. But it's not like illuminated. It won't have goblins on that, I'm afraid. Nonetheless, it will be hand drawn by a calligrapher operating out of Chicago, which I think is pretty cool. Anyway, so hopefully we get that. Yeah, tonight, what are we doing in this live stream? Well, as you can see, it's the David C. Smith double bill. What does that mean? It means I wanted a way for us to, and by us I mean myself and some panelists I'll be introducing real soon. I wanted us to have a way to discuss David C. Smith's prose and storytelling without spoiling Sometime Lofty Towers. Now, luckily, Sometime Lofty Towers is not my first time working with David. David has been in the magazine, our magazine, New Edge Sword and Sorcery, twice. He was in literally the very first issue ever, issue 0, which was kind of our fun prototype thing we released in September of 2022. And the next year, he came back for a story with the same characters, which we'll talk about in a minute, in issue 2. Which is available as an add-on for the crowdfund if you want to grab it after this, so you can read it yourself amongst many other great stories. So I see someone has commented, and that tells me there are humans. There are other things that tell me that too. So why don't we start bringing people on stage? We're going to start with one of 3 wonderful night owls who are joining us from Europe or the UK, which is a distinct entity these days. We have Luana.
Hi, Oliver.
Happy to see you here. A regular in our short story chats and always a great participant. Thanks for staying up late.
You're so welcome. Always a pleasure to join you and the other wonderful people here.
Night Owl number 2, in no particular order, is Jeremy Pack Nelson. Hey, man.
Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure. I love talking and I love writing, so this works out.
Yeah, it all adds up. And actually, you also have a story in issue 2 of Nest, folks. It's not what we're going to be talking about tonight, but keep an eye out for it if you grab the issue. A Debt Forgotten, A Debt Unpaid by Jeremy Pack Nelson. Yeah. Meanwhile, we have another something less of a night owl, but still, from my point of view, living in the future. We have Steve Westenroth out from the Maritimes. Hey. All right, how are you doing, Steve? Oh no, we can't hear you. I think you're muted.
No, I muted myself because for some reason I was like, I need to do this on top of being not in. Yeah. Anyway, I'm being too careful, basically.
All good.
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Just apparently bad at technology.
There. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have from sunny New York. Is it sunny there right now? Kurt A. Johnson. Hey, man.
Hey, good evening all. Luna, Jeremy, Steve, and Oliver. What's up, guys?
And Oliver sometimes. I was just checking. I couldn't remember if your first story in Ness was in issue 2 or 1, but I think you must be in issue 1.
It was 1,
yes,
yeah.
of course. You were the first story in that table of contents. So I don't have that handy. But anyway, so yeah, those of us who have physical copies, if you want to flash them just for fun, just to show off, this is what Ness is for people who maybe have found this crowdfund and have no idea. So yeah, it gives me pleasure. It's nice to be at this point now. Yeah, nice to be at this point now where like we've been doing it a while. We got a few issues, and now our first novel is by one of the authors from those early issues. I really like that a lot. Anyway, the 2 stories they probably have names. Maybe I should share them. The story of issue 0 is Old Moon Over Irukad, and we'll start chatting about that. And then we'll also talk a bit about issue 2 story, which is Atonement for a Resurrected God. I suppose I'll kick off the discussion a little bit since I do have the unique perspective of being the publisher of it. David C. Smith, I learned about him from chat on the no longer extant Whetstone Tavern Discord, where someone who was just a big fan of him brought him up, and I was like, oh, I haven't heard about David. What's his whole deal? And found out about him writing the Red Sonja novels for Richard Alterny. I read about his Oron books. And then they said, oh, there's this book, Sometime Lofty Towers. But a lot of people hadn't heard of it. It was just very low-key word of mouth because I guess the original publisher had not, something befell them, basically. They published the book and then weren't able to promote it. But I was very lucky that someone on the tavern told me about it. I read it. I fell in love with it. And I immediately reached out to David for an interview. And that began a wonderful relationship that led to him having a story in issue 0. And now years later, the original publisher just moved on entirely to nonfiction and were sweethearts and let me have the rights so that I could repackage and put out this book to make sure that it remains available. So yeah, David joined us with the new Edge issue 0, which was really cool because this was like a sweat equity thing. Nobody involved made any money, myself especially included. But the idea was to just kind of show like what we wanted to do and some of the ideas about trying to make Sword and Sorcery a bigger, more inclusive, more creative place. David was kind of a cool addition because I wanted to show the other part of our whole deal, which is love for the classics, right? And we have like a classic author, a guy who was there at the tail end of the second wave of Sword and Sorcery, but is still working now, still pushing it, still being creative. And I just think that's really cool. So I can hear my voice going. I've been talking so much all week. So why don't I give myself a break here and just say, I don't know, I'll start with you, Kurt. I imagine maybe you read it when the issue came out a while ago, but how did this read strike you?
I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised how much I actually enjoyed it. I haven't been reading a lot lately. It's still recovering from surgery and stuff of that nature, so I've been really kind of weird. But this was good. This was like Verissa really. Like I can't really explain it. Verissa was really like someone I was really interested in reading more about. I wanted to read more. I mean, like right off the bat, I'll be honest. I have not been reading many LGBTQ characters in stories, right? And to see them both of that community was refreshing. It was a very refreshing read. And also in just in just illuminating me in the idea that you can have LGBTQ plus characters in a fantasy, a sword and sorcery story, which, you know, you gotta be honest, sword and sorcery was always that man's what is it, power fantasy for men.
A lot of
Right?
it was. A lot of it was.
So
Yeah.
all those toxic ideas about manliness and you know, getting the girl, rescuing the damsel, killing her, you know, all that stuff, you know, it's really refreshing to see that other characters, other kinds of people can play in that kind of field and not be so toxic, right? Their friendship alone was
I really
like
like their
caring,
dynamic.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it more. I'll be honest, I saw it more in I saw it in Old Moon Over Irukad when should I give spoilers? No spoilers. Spoiler alert.
Oh yeah, so I'm gonna say right up front, folks, spoilers. We can't. It'd be very hard to discuss these stories without saying much of what happened in them. So if you don't, you know, if you really don't like spoilers, I would say come back for the recording later. But yeah. So the story's been free and digital for like a couple of years now, and I gave everybody a heads up in advance of this. So yeah, go for it. Go for all the
Right.
spoilers you want.
When Adrian catches a bad one from the vampires, and she kind of like has like a little crash out over him, like her losing him in that way, and it was kind of like that was friendship, right? That was I mean, I want to say it's not, because I think a lot of people would think of it as a romantic kind of connection that they have, but it's not. It's platonic and it's intimate at the same time, right? It's a platonic but intimate relationship that they have, a closest that they have, and I think he pulled it off very well in this tale. I
love their dynamic, and I think we're going to dig deeper into that later. But
I have arguments with my friends about this idea of platonic intimacy. Like you can have, you can chill with your dude, with people, with friends, and have those intimate moments.
Absolutely,
right? And not really, it's not, these are dudes, of course, that I'm, always on the fence of being friends with because they have very homophobic views on things, and I'm like, I don't know if I shouldn't be talking to you anymore, dude. This is so fucking.
Well, don't name.
So
You're
1950. This is so 1950s, bro. This is like 2025 now. We should be able to, expand and expound on ideas of friendship and intimacy and love.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's part of the joy of these two characters, right? Because it's so like romantic intimacy is so off the table with them, but clearly they care about each other very much and have a long established relationship before this adventure when we meet them.
And you know what? And I got to say, I clapped at the end when him and Malon.
Yeah,
just knowing that they got it. All right, good for him. It's like good shit, man. Good for him. And I was actually really happy about that part too. He deserved to get that was something.
I really like that too because of her checking on somebody out at the beginning, and then it's like, oh, actually he was ahead of her on the getting
right.
Adrian was a little sneakier.
I did enjoy that dynamic of the characters and him coming out at the end, that kind of surprise of who this guy was. I was wondering who he was, of course, when he was first introduced, and waiting for that Chekhov's gun. See what?
Yeah, like it was kind of more cagey about his background beyond the fact that he worked for us.
They kind of played him like he was a goofy dude, like he was that goofy dude that liked somebody, and you're like, hey, he that, whatever, kind of like brushing off, like, oh, isn't that a friend of yours? You just that dude to be chasing after me and stuff. That's how they played it off, and and for it to be two dudes, I appreciate that.
And that's the sort of detail that makes it work well on a reread, right? Because then when you read it again, all these twists and turns take on a different light, and what seems like, oh, that guy's we're being awkward about him because he's not that great to have around. It's more like, oh, we don't want to give our plan away. let's just pretend that this guy is a useless tag along.
Right. Right.
And so Jeremy, what was something that stood out to you on this read or reread? I don't know if this is the
Well,
first time you've read
what was different on reread is, since then I'd written my own story that features kind of two central protagonists, and seeing how someone else handled that, I paid much more attention to it this time around than I did before. I really enjoyed how, I would echo what Kirk said. We kind of, in the very beginning, get set up with the subversion of our expectations of like the standard sword and sorcery story of like, oh yeah, we're checking somebody out, so clearly we know what we're in for, but actually it's not entirely what you'd expect. I really like the point about the camaraderie, and I think I'm just going to point at this tangent that we won't go too deeply down, and it's just about how it's become very difficult to write about deep platonic love, period, I feel like, and we just don't have as much of that in our culture, maybe even especially with like straight men, to be honest. And I think having this dynamic here is another way of approaching it that maybe will let us have a lens into something that I think we miss in our culture, like truly deep, profound friendships. That I think, So tangent.
No. That's legit. And if I can just touch on that real quick, I feel it's one of those things where I joke about the whole return, thing people do online. Like, let's go back to the better era. But in this one, and then I more seriously, in a similar way, will say, oh well, there's stuff we don't want to bring forward from the classic tales, but there's stuff we do, and these things kind of overlap in a funny way, because if you look back at fiction from like let's say the 1800s through to like some of the early adventure fiction, through to I would say some of the early SNS fiction, there was a lot of what I believe, if I remember correctly, is called like homeosocial relationships, which is essentially just like strong friendships between two people of the same gender, and a lot of friendships between dudes, which sometimes it's a bit of the they were just really good pals routine, but sometimes they were really just good pals. And sometimes they really did feel comfortable talking at length about the depth of their friendship and like how much they love each other as like two buddies. And then, somewhere around the 20th century, we kind of lost that to a lot of silly concerns between people not wanting to be seen a certain way for just like loving their bros. And so, I'm with you on that. I would love to see, and hey, I'm a publisher, so guess what, authors, we're open for submissions August 1st. If you want to send me some hella homeosocial sword and sorcery, bring it on. Bring me the deep platonic friendships between adventurers, because when you think about it, I mean, these are people that rely on each other to, they literally fight back to back. At a point in this story, a lot of their history, I love this, like just giving little bits of dialogue. I mean, there's no like big long stop to tell us their history, but just little bits and pieces like, oh well, make sure the money's real this time.
Right.
Just like, oh okay. Like, oh, Adrian's misled them before, but like there's little bit of like friendly kind of sparks coming off them in the sense of like
like one has a foot fetish.
David does a really good job
of
he does a really good job of alluding to this backstory, and you're like, oh, is this actually covered in some other story? I don't know, but it feels real, like there is some kind of history that they both, and yes, there's references, but it's also when they know to respond to each other, or you see it in the action scenes when they're ready to have each other's backs.
For sure. And actually, Matt Sullivan's here just letting us know he loves the romances, especially with booze and badassery, which, hey, I'm here for it too. Okay, well, let's keep leaping around the table here, because there's so much more I want to go on all these things, but I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to speak first. Luana, was this your first read or a reread?
This was a reread. I read the 0 and 2 like last year or something. It was my first actual David C. Smith read. I guess before that, I had purchased a Red Sonja Humble Bundle, which featured a Marvel Comics adaptation of one of his novels, The Ring of Ikribu. So I read that. It was cool. I had Red Sonja, I believe, riding a mammoth, which was pretty cool. But yeah, no, this was a reread. And I gotta second what Kirk was saying there. I love the camaraderie between the lesbian and the gay guy, and I actually want to pick up on what you were saying with the, with the meme with we got to return. I say that a lot, actually. Like, I just say, like, yeah, we do got to return, but we got to return in a woke way. And I think David C. Smith kind of nailed that with this shit, because this is a really classic sword and sorcery story. Like, this shit could have happened to Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser.
Absolutely.
Like, talk about your platonic bromance, but he just did it in a way that he dragged that classic template into the 21st century. Like, here's, this Fafhrd and this Grey Mouser happen to be a gay dude and a lesbian. And, you've got that dynamic where one of them, Edrion, is like the fun party boy, and Varissa is kind of the grumpy warrior. He's like, what kind of shit are you pulling me in again? So no, yeah, I think David really, I don't know, did he, Oliver, here's a question for you. Did he submit this, or did you commission it?
So issue 0, because nobody was getting paid, I didn't feel right doing open submissions. So what I did, everybody who was in that issue was a commissioned story. I reached out to David, and I was like, here's the general idea of New Age Sword and Sorcery. And he was like, all right. And he went off and he thought about it for a bit, and then he pitched the gist of this to me, and I said, sounds great. He mentioned he'd never written like queer protagonists, and he loved the idea of this duo, and he was like, can I run with that? And I was like, yeah, man, sure. And so, yeah.
No, because that was the vibe I was getting. Because, like, this is like, David at this point had been writing sword and sorcery for literal decades, like just an old pro. And the general mission statement of New Edge is like, pay respect to the classics, but bring it into a new age. And I was like, this is how an old pro would handle it. Like, this is literally classic sword and sorcery with that new edge to it. Like, this is a guy who literally understood the assignment.
Yeah.
It
made me very happy when I got the manuscript. And I worked with him on editing it, as I do with all the other authors, and there's always notes. It doesn't matter who you are. But I can say I don't recall giving him a lot of notes, and it was just like some little tweaks. And along the way, he actually came back to me one note. He's like, actually, that's a real word, and check this out. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna learn. I'm just gonna sit back and and I will say that is one of the great pleasures of working with David, is that he really knows language, and I do want to dig into that a little bit before we wrap up tonight. Every time I've worked with him, he's taught me something new, which is a real treat. So Steve, how about you? Was this your first read or a reread, and what was something with you?
This was my first read, and it was really an interesting time, sort of getting to know these. I'll try not to talk about the second story, which was my favorite of the two, but and save that to later. But it was kind of fun getting to know these characters over the course of the two stories, and just seeing how their dynamic was like retained across the stories, but also sort of differed, I suppose. Yeah, like that for me was an interesting part of it. It's a really tiny thing. One of my favorite things, though, was actually like the return by close, just because I'm very fond of that in general. So like when a story, just for anyone who doesn't know what that is, when something begins with a motif or an image or some kind of aspect of a scene, maybe even like a metaphor or a symbol, and then it closes by returning back to that sort of key image or scene. And so here we see that happen a little bit with obviously the woman in the tavern, and it's sort of like twisted in that neat way, right? Because at that point, then by then we know that we're not understanding it quite the same way that we might have at the beginning. As everyone's pointed out, like the way that the queerness kind of isn't, I wouldn't say, I guess it is revealed, but yeah, like just it's revealed over the course of the narrative. So that was something I really enjoyed about it. And just like jumping off of what you were saying about, New Edge's kind of mandate, I suppose, of bringing kind of the style of the classics sort of forward, if we want to talk about it as a kind of trajectory. I find it so interesting just because, to me, a lot of it is about, it's not that readers at the time who were queer or who were people of color weren't reading these stories and weren't imagining tales of their own, it's often that they were shut out of opportunities to publish them. And so one of the like really moving, but also kind of tragic elements of it is sort of like reading these stories now where we get these characters or we get authors being allowed kind of in suddenly who were shut out before, is that sense of like, oh, suddenly we're allowed to play in the sandbox, or suddenly there's new toys in the sandbox, right? Like there's new voices that are able to be heard. And it's not the same as those people who maybe wanted to publish in the past, you know, suddenly being allowed to, save for perhaps the ones who are, you know, still writing or have jumped in now that they're able to, but or are now able to publish. But it at least feels like there's a connectivity there between contemporary authors then and, you know, dreamers who maybe didn't have an opportunity to see their dreams sort of made ink and paper.
I hear you absolutely, and that is a very sort of is a bittersweet or wistful kind of thing to think about. You know, I mean, I will happily publish a really tight sword and sorcery story that's written in a more contemporary style, but I won't lie. Something that I love is to just like read a story that makes me feel like, oh, this is like what if the people that you were just mentioning got the opportunity in 1932. You know, this is like if We're Tales, yeah. Published a bunch of people whose names I don't know because they didn't get published. And so yeah, that is something I really enjoy because I love that sort of vintage voice being matched to contemporary subject matter and ideas, very much so. And to have that be written by someone who kind of sits in between, right? Like David is of the very end of the second wave. He came in right at the end of the 70s and it was there for the collapse in the early 80s. And so
clarify, he was not writing in 1932.
Yeah, David is not that vintage. You know, yeah.
By the way, he's immortal also. First immortal author ever to be like featured.
Yeah, actually, Karl Edward Wagner's Kane, loosely based on David's life. No. But,
immortal representation is so important.
Exactly. Yes, and we just want him to know how valid he is.
You'll get the prize one day, David.
Right. Don't lose your head.
Oh, yeah.
Don't lose your head.
Well, you know, we're almost halfway through already, and there's so much I want to cover. But Steve, you know what? Just for the heck of it, why don't we allow ourselves? I'll say this to the table, but I'm going to start with you. Why don't we allow ourselves the freedom to discuss these characters and David's writing, just kind of going between the two stories? I think that we're going to talk about the second one. So, Steve, what was it about the second adventure? Atonement for Resurrected God, which from the editorial, I'll just say with this one thing. David was like, oh, what should I do this time? And I was like, we haven't had any ocean stories yet. He's like, all right. And he went off and he's like, got it. And went off and did this. Like, I did not, you know, craft the story at all, but it was funny just to give him that one note. And he's like, okay. And he ran with it. So, Steve, what was it about this one you really Yeah.
I think, I mean, selfishly, part of it is just that I love a good kind of sea yarn with sea monsters and immortal beings and, you know, dread secrets and that kind of thing, tentacles. You know, it's like anything like that is bound to be a good time for me. And I got, I don't know if any of you have played the game Obra Dinn at all.
Yeah.
Yay! Yeah, I got kind of Obra Dinn.
I get that.
Yeah. If you like Obra Dinn, please read this story. And if you like the story, please check out Obra Dinn, it's a very narrative video game. So like you don't need to be a big gamer or anything like action-y stuff. It's a logic puzzle, really, I guess you'd call it. But yeah, it's sort of you know, eldritch creatures on a ship, and there's a mystery on the ship as well. And yeah, so I really was primed to just like this. And I also learned, you mentioned, Oliver, like that David's language is just so impressive. And I learned a new word from the story as well, which was, I looked it up just to make sure I had it right again, but taffrail, which is the rail around the stern of a vessel, apparently. Did any of you guys know what that was already? Or?
No.
I don't remember if that was particularly the word he taught me when we were doing the edits, but it might have been.
Yeah. I was excited. I always I saw someone, I don't want to take credit this because I think I saw someone on Twitter, like ye olde Twitter, say something about how every time they had to write about boats, they had to relearn what all the parts on a boat were.
Mm.
And that's 100% me. And like, yeah. So every single time it's like, I'm duck going, and like it's like, diagram boat, like basic. And then I work my way up. So
that happened to me when I was writing my contribution to NES issue 5. Like at one point, my characters are on a boat, and I was literally looking at a diagram for like, wait, what am I describing right now?
Yes, which one's the aft and which one's the port, and like don't know, not right now anyway. So that was exciting. Yeah, I really liked that aspect of it, and there's something about the romance of like, and I think that's a piece of what for me with like classic stories I really like is the sense of romance, like not in the sense of like category romance, although that can be there too, but in the sense of like these really like 19th century romantic kind of vibes.
Yeah.
Like I kind of long for a little bit of that, and this story felt like it had that, along with that sort of like weird tales sort of vibe for me. Yeah.
For sure. And you know what, I'm going to say one thing I liked and then kick it over to somebody else. One thing I really enjoyed about that story was that it still felt like episodic storytelling, right? We could just be airdropped in, and we know who they are roughly enough to follow it and learn more as you go along. But if you read the previous story, as I did, reread in preparation for this, it was fun to go from that sort of like pilot episode, which was absolutely like, okay, so like in screenwriting, like when people talk about TV shows and writing the actual very first episode, you always have to make a choice between doing something that's like a more traditional pilot where you tell us episode that's not like the ones that are going to come after. This one is methodically introducing everything about the two characters, and like by the end of the episode, usually then we have everything assembled to do the show. Or you can do, like with people come together and meet for the first time, and then they're a duo or whatever, right? Or you can do just a regular episode with like a little bit of extra explaining on top, maybe, and just be like, this is the platonic ideal of the show. This is what it's going to be like going forward. Have fun. I'm a big fan of the latter. I'm a big fan of just drop people in and be like, this is it. And I really liked that David chose to do that with his first story, because it means you could read these two tales in either order and be fine, which I'm a big fan of. But also, if you read the issue 0 story first, and you go to Atonement for Resurrected God number 2, it's kind of cute how, like, it's episodic, it's standalone, but it does change things a little for you if you've read them elsewhere, because then you're like, oh, now I'm learning a little bit about their like take on religion that didn't come up in the previous story. Right? You're learning that like Edrian, like his faith is really important to him. Versus kind of like not exactly an obnoxious atheist, but yeah. So I mean, okay, so just like throwing that out there, but you can also abandon it if you want and talk about some other aspect. Jeremy, how did you find Atonement for Resurrected God? What was
well, I'll carry on with what you just brought up, because I think one clever thing that both stories do, but in different ways, is like having these like greater and lesser antagonists, right? In the first story, they were sort of minions, but in this story, the sea monster is its own entity. It has its own desires. It doesn't have anything to do with this cursed demigod figure that we learn more about later on. That's still a mystery. But because of that, you can have this like theme of religion be more represented by a character, and like have that sort of conversation in the conflict itself of the story. And I think it's a great way of like not being too on the nose about it, because first we get to chop up some tentacular monsters and save some lives, and then we can sort of like delve into the ramifications of faith in this world.
How about you, Kirk? How do you feel about Atonement for Resurrected God?
That's I was just about to talk about the idea of faith and belief. I felt that Edrian was the reason why he was like kind of like that chipper, happy-go-lucky kind of character is because of his faith, because of his belief in the one God of the sun, right? And the medallion that he carried with the squiggly lines and creating the sign. And that kind of plays off in that kind of trope, like, happier people are religious people.
Which is
and
not
grumpy
always
people
true, of
ain't.
course.
Right. But grumpy people ain't, and
Yeah.
because Marissa's she's badass, but she's grumpy.
Oh yeah, and I mean, if I can interrupt for 2
grumpy.
seconds, we've got it right there in the art, right?
Right.
He's
Yeah.
holding his religious symbol, and she's kind of just like, looking at him as
Right.
he's ready to get on the boat. Shout out to Simon Underwood for the illustrations.
You know,
Anyways,
I
continue.
mean,
One of my
even
favorite
though,
NES
you know,
art pieces.
you can always say, and it was her, I guess, her disregard for belief systems or religion really helped them or saved them somewhat, because she getting rid of getting rid of it, throwing it overboard and kind of like disregarding it.
Yep.
You know, it helped move the story along at that point as well.
I'm really
Yeah,
glad
I
that
think-
happened.
Right.
You don't always get someone just like, just chuck it overboard. Like, let's just get rid of this. You know?
Yeah.
And also with how the faith element works out, it I think it's a great example of how to do characterization in an episodic way. Because we have this moment at the end when Adrian is like, so you felt the power of this
Right.
of this god, right? So like you have some evidence of greater powers, and she's like, and we get the sense like maybe she acknowledges that it's real, but maybe she's going to, maybe this is or isn't going to have an impact on her going forward. But like just having that moment, even if it doesn't lead directly into something else in another story, it's a moment of character depth that can exist however you read it.
Right. It's a very on brand of her to be like, nah, I ain't feel nothing. Right, to totally lie about it, but she did, and that's how I interpret it anyway. It's she did feel something, but she can't. She, as that friendship goes, I can't admit that shit to you. You'd never let me live it down. He would never let her live that shit down if she was admit. Yeah, I felt something.
And isn't it nice how, like, I feel this is a real strength of David's that absolutely comes into Sometime Lofty Towers in its own way, which I will not spoil. But here, you know, we have this character who's very religious in their faith, very important to them, and you have this other person who's the flip of that. But both characters like are given some depth. Both characters' points of view like give them sort of strength at key moments in the story. And yet you don't feel like you're being fed like a false equivalency. Everyone's right and everyone's good. And, you know, all opinions are equal. You know, you just feel like you're looking at like humans. You're feeling looking at complex characters. And I really appreciate that. Yeah. Like,
absolutely. Like when Adrian's praying at the end, we find out like, oh, he's actually praying for essentially like this terrible damnation of and torture, not like what you'd assume a religious person to be doing.
I basically gave David a high five over the phone on that one. That was a beat I really really liked.
Right. Because that does happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does happen.
Yeah, it's like I'll be praying for you. I didn't say for what.
Right.
Luana, how did you find Atonement for Resurrected God? Was there what left out to you?
I'm gonna go against the grain and say that I think I would have preferred Atonement for a Resurrected God as the first story of.
Oh, okay.
Because like you were talking about, like, oh, you can read it in any order, and yeah, you can. However, I feel that there is a Tower of the Elephant style quality to Atonement, where they are kind of dropped in some supernatural. Yeah, there's something supernatural in the other one as well, which I'll get to. But this is something supernatural that illuminates something about Edrian, something about Marissa, and they kind of defeat it to the extent that they can by their own hand, right? And I feel that in Old Moon Over Irukad, it's kind of divorced from them. It's a fairly random. Oh, here's a dark temple. Here's some gargoyles or vampires or what it was, and they kind of have their asses saved by Malon, who kind of swoops in and saves the day, which is a funny reversal. It's like, oh, this is a hanger-on, and I feel that that's kind of a twist on the heroic formula, where if you don't know Marissa and Edrian, you kind of want to see them be badasses in their own right.
Right.
Okay.
And if they are bested in some way, or then have it be by by these these crazy creatures or these godlike interventions. And I feel like Malon felt like an extra, like a twist too much for a first story. Like you could almost, if you didn't know anything about it, like I kind of knew Person Edrian were gonna be returning. If you didn't know anything about it, you might be forgiven for thinking, yo, is Malon the hero actually? Are we gonna is the second story gonna be with him? Because he's queer too, and I think he's even described as being kind of like a paunchy guy.
Yeah, chubby kind of.
Yeah, right. And like he would have fit into the Ness mandate as well. Like he's a kind of a plus size guy. He's queer. Like, okay, sure. But no, it's about Person Edrian. So I was like, okay, that's kind of a weird first impression of them. So I think if I had Atonement first, then my takeaway from Old Moon would have been like, oh, Edrian, you're trying to, I knew who the guy was, and like you're trying to run away from this boyfriend that or this one night stand or whatever, and I guess having Old Moon first made me go, huh, okay, this guy is more qualified than we gave him credit for, but he's just a random guy. he's just a side character. So yeah. I guess I actually have a preferred reading order.
I was about to say,
also very classy. Yeah,
I was about to say, like, I appreciate the substance of everything you just said, but also thank you so much for now bringing into these characters who have literally 2 stories a preferred reading order. I'm gonna raise clickbait controversy.
What is more return than that? What is more golden age than that? Someone who has no link to David C. Smith whatsoever starting to impose her preferred reading order.
Like, how Elric is that, right? Like, yeah, I know, I love it.
Yeah, I think there's a interesting thought experiment that, if this were a story collection and you were ordering them, I think it would really depend on the rest of the composition, because, I think the happy ending of the first story, pun intended, if that's what you start off with, and it might represent how the rest of the collection might go. If, like, how much do them fulfilling their adventuring versus them fulfilling like this search for connection or love, is like, which one of those is the main theme over the course of the collection. I think that would determine which I would put first, I think.
Right.
But I think everything you said, Luana, makes perfect sense too, especially if you want to like establish them as competent protagonists that are like gonna take it to evil.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just gonna throw this out. Whoever wants to grab and run with it first, go for it. Except you, Luana, you just spoke. How do you feel about?
You are banned from talking.
It's impossible, but we'll try. How about? How do y'all feel about? I mean, I love it, obviously, because we're doing some kind of multi towers here. But how do y'all feel about the world building in this? I will mention one thing I particularly liked, and then let y'all run with it. I really liked how I feel David hits a good mid ground between not telling you enough, so you're kind of not engaged, and telling you so much you just feel like you're getting like the background to his role-playing game campaign, and leaving some room for you to infer, leaving some room for your imagination to run, but him giving you something to run with. And so the element of that I particularly liked was in Old Moon Over Urukad, where they're in the bar early on, and there's just like a little mention about these like 9 elders who founded the city. There's statues of them in the bar, and then we quickly move on, and then later we meet these little gnarly little vampires. They're kind of like little feral buggers, right? They're not sort of classic like aged noble men or whatever,
atrophied, and it's a family. Don't forget that's important. It's a family of them.
Yeah, it's a family,
Yeah.
and nothing gets confirmed in the text of the story. But this, my sort of like headcanon, fun subtext, whatever. As I was seeing those little buggers charge around and being horrible, I was like, what if those are like the Nine or the descendants of the Nine? Like that's where like these noble knights that were founded the city that are so key to its like, identity. What if by this point they're just horrible little critters gnawing on Edrin? Like.
we got a headcanon. We got a preferred reading order.
Mm-hmm.
David, you are a pro.
And
you are
honestly,
doing this shit with 2 stories, man.
Yeah. And honestly, you do cross-textual stuff. Like, it's not spoilery to say that sometimes Lofty Towers makes it very clear, even before you read the interview in the back with David, that people with a lot of wealth who pursue wealth as a means of living are not portrayed positively. And so to come back to the story, thinking with that in the back of my head and going, yeah, well, what if the idea was that, David's just sliding it out there, letting you put it together if you want to, that the like noble, as we're told they were founders of the city, who were presumably quite wealthy, become degenerate little, ankle biters. Like,
right.
Well, I as a wealthy person am deeply offended.
Oh no.
Rich person representation. I am not wealthy at all. I owe like $50 to the bank. So.
Dear. But here, Steve, you run with it. How did you feel about the degree to which there was world building, with the value of what was told versus what was inferred or left blank? Like, how did that hit you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like, I loved all the pieces that you mentioned, and I agree. It feels like a full world without there being necessarily a lot of really explicit on-page stuff. I am one of those people, I think, with a lot of like fantasy settings, particularly fantasy settings that have like a classic feel. My brain will fill in the details a lot for me. And so for me, I think it was certainly, especially with the first story, and then I started to get more of a sense, especially as the religious aspects came into it, of like, like, okay, there's some really intriguing little different things going on here. But yeah, like I say that, but I don't necessarily mean it as a negative. I think in many ways it's a strength, because it sort of allows you just to easily drop into the setting and drop into the story. The focus here to me is not on the world building, it's on the adventure. And so like that's where he wants your attention to be. So, he's not talking about this other stuff. So that's really kind of my sense of it. And then the things that we do get that are a bit sort of like, like just askance slightly from like what you would expect in such a setting. Like those are like those curious moments that I think for me, it's like, oh, that would make me read deeper into the world. So like that was quite interesting, I think. Yeah, definitely.
How did the setting and all that stuff come off to you, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think Steve put it really well, and it's all about the iceberg, right? You want to give the 10% that implies something much deeper. And I think for these stories, what stood out to me were the villains, the monsters. Like you said, Oliver, like vampires were not what we expected. The Leviathan wasn't really Leviathan because like the tentacles have eyes. They're like something else is going on there. The demigod thing was sort of like a werewolf, but wasn't exactly like the sunsets and this transformation.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this really interesting. Like we fill in the gaps of this backdrop, but like for these key elements of the adventure, things are different enough that we think, oh, this is not the average world. This is a different world the author has taken the time to invent. And I'm going to assume that there is depth and coherence behind it, because what I've seen so far is convincing and interesting. It's like the key detail is what makes something believable. And those villains, and like when Edrin's called out for being religious, like, oh, you're of this sect, right? Like that particular detail is what makes us think, oh yeah, there's this whole implied potentially persecution or like just cultural conflict that we aren't going to dwell on, but like that's enough to make us believe it's there in the background.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. How about you, Kirk? How did you feel about the world?
I would have to, agreeing with Steve that it was minimalist, for lack of a better term. Right? It was more about the adventure, more about the characters, how they interact with each other. as opposed to interacting with the space and the time. Like I like when I read a story, I like to get clues on the setting, what they're using, what they're wearing. If you add chiton in as part of the dress code, then I start thinking of ancient Greece and Rome, right? If you describe the ship as a bireme or a trireme, as opposed to a merchant galley, you get two different kind of images in your head on what the world looks like, right? And I kind of like that. And even though Dave doesn't do that, I still enjoy what he did with the characters and the story. He put more into the monsters, really. And I want that, and I don't mind that, right? Right, the horror of the like Jeremy mentioned, I thought it was a squid at first until he mentioned the eyes, and it looked like, it was like, oh, it's not. And then he talked about looking over the railing and you see the maw and the teeth, and I was like, oh, this is something totally different. This is nothing, right? And then those are the things that drew me to the story more so than the setting and other like the I guess the more minute aspects of world building, like what they're wearing, stuff like that. So
Kirk, that's a great layup. So I'm going to grab that. Thank you. Because the last we got time for like maybe one more element to quickly discuss, and the one I'm going to toss it to you after I set it up here, which is the weird with a capital W. Another thing I liked about this is whether it's, for me, my favorite expressions of the weird in stories are either something fairly unique or something that's very familiar but like tweaked in a way enough that I still find it kind of fun and amusing. Like whether it's the gnarly little vampires that I suspect are the descendants of the founders of the city, but they're more like critters. They're not, like I said, the classic vampire. So that's a little weird. But for me, the capital W weird element in that story, the thing that surprised me, and I do think that often is what I find with stuff that I really love that I would call weird with a capital W, is surprise. When the scroll turns out to be alive and starts inching along, that was like, okay. Like, I was so focused. There's so much else going on. And I was like, okay. Well, I mean, I literally just want to say like that is weird. So Luana, how did you feel about David's, tackling the weird, the supernatural, the liminal? Pardon me.
Yeah, I think that is a great corollary to like the minimalism that Kirk brought up, in the sense that you only got to world build just enough for your adventure / action plot to make sense and resonate, and you got to put in just that dash of the weird for that momentum to keep going, get you from point A to point B, we don't get any we get a moving spell, but we don't get any scroll, sorry, not spell, but we don't get, I don't know, the explanation of how spells are cast or whatever, we get exactly.
Where's the magic system? Sorry, go on.
Oh God.
I know, red meat for us people, but
just enough to make you go, huh, what? And on to the next thing. I got to reference what Kirk said again when we start with is it a squid? No, it's not a squid. There's weird extra shit on top of that. That reminded me of Charles Saunders did that a lot in Imaro, where like a guy is weird, or he's a wizard or whatever, and like he's probably gonna have like, I don't know, scales or whatever. And then he's like throws his robe off and there's like a bunch of weird shit going on. And like he had goat legs and a lion's mane and a like and
I wonder if Charles was on the acid a little bit. That might have been a really interesting acid trip for him for a minute. But yeah.
I need some of his shit, let me tell you. No, but that just that weird little twist every time where you think that the setting that I was most brought to mind of was Lankmar. Yeah, but yeah, there was always that little twist where you were like, oh, okay, yeah, not exactly what I thought he was going for. The werewolf was already mentioned, or the what you think is going to be a werewolf was already mentioned. So, no, yeah,
Yeah,
good.
just have a little
A
twist, have a
guy
little
that
surprise.
knows the genre is what I'm trying to get at.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I wish I was publishing it, but I'll remind everybody that he has just finished the manuscript for a book on writing sword and sorcery that will come out through Pulp Hero Press at some point later this year.
Oh, cool.
I can't wait to. Well, I'm going to be nice and say I can't wait to read it. Well, actually, he sent me the manuscript so I can check it out. Publisher privilege. But I can't wait for other people to check it out. Maybe it's a better way to put it. I'm about halfway through. And
I would be
it's
very
cool stuff.
curious because, like, I'm a big fan of Flame and Crimson by Brian Murphy.
Correct.
And I would love to hear a second take on writing sword and sorcery, with like the big elements of sword and sorcery. And I obviously, from what we've read here, David is a guy who knows his shit.
He is, and in the end, as we've discussed in specific elements, like he's paying attention to what's new and feels that there's great value in what is new. And without spoiling the book, I don't think this is a spoiler. I will say that like it's not a history, right? It's more about the writing, but he has excerpts from various stories going back to some classics, but also a lot of contemporary stuff. You know, including some stories some of y'all might find familiar. It's just really nice to see someone who's been around the block, who was there during the last time Sword and Sorcery really kind of took over, saying like, look, we want to keep learning about the classic characters, obviously, but there's been 10,000 gallons of metaphorical ink spilled about Liber, about Howard, and so on, and we'll keep talking about them, but let's maybe put a little more ink towards like more recent creators, and make sure people learn about them. And I think that's pretty cool. That's a very cool attitude for someone who could easily, he's in his early 70s. He could be crusty. There's been anything good since 1981. All that stuff. So yeah, I'm very excited for people to read that book, and it's gonna be pretty cool. But in the meanwhile, I'm very excited for people to read Sometime in Lofty Towers. And we're at that point now. I've got a couple of minutes, but if you want to hang with us, my brain is like boiled oatmeal at the end of a crowdfund, and it's almost over. It ends tomorrow at, as I said, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I'm kind of babbling a little bit, but I'm just going to say I love doing these short story chats. I love having at this point, a nice long roster of cool people I can invite to chat, and so it's nice to end Luana, and so it's really nice to see.
There you go. That's how you do it.
But yeah, no, it's really lovely. Jeremy, Steve, Luana, Kirk, thank you so much for making time in your evenings at various points in the evening to come here and chat about David's stories, so that we can share a little bit about like why David's writing is cool, why we love both the writing and the man, and why Lana, I know you're reading a little ways into Sometime Lofty Towers right now yourself. Like, so you're getting a taste. Like, Sometime Lofty Towers tonally is very different to these two stories. It's certainly, I would say, a heavier tale, deals with some heavier big themes, but no less has all the techniques that we've discussed tonight used in it. And yeah, I really love that book. There's a reason I want to make it the first novel that my little publishing house puts out. There's a reason I would, I can only do so many like crowdfunds in a year, so each spot is very precious, and I was very happy to give one of those spots to this book, and I'm so happy we're going to get it out. It's like I said, it's funded. And what color? Okay, actually, you know what? Let's wrap up on that one. Gold, red, or purple. Luana, I think you said you want purple.
Yeah, I voted purple, but I was instantly shouted down by the red crowd.
I saw that. I was so sad. The purple sounded good.
All right, so Steve, you're pro purple.
I'm pro being very indecisive, and I liked all the colors. But I was like, yeah, purple, and then I was like, yeah, I can see the value of red also, and like, yeah, gold.
And the gold people, there's some of them, and they're passionate. Jeremy, how about you? What color would you go for?
Like Steve, the siren call of indecision. Always there. But I think there's something really visceral about purple. I think
okay.
All
right. And how about you, Kirk? We have another vote for indecision, or
so we have red, purple, and gold, correct?
Yeah.
Correct. The gold is like a pale yellow gold, not metallic.
Okay. You know, I'm gonna go with the crowd, man. Purple.
Well, we'll
I'm
see
gonna go
what
with the
happens,
people.
'cause-
the people have spoken.
Well, we'll see what happens, because, like I said earlier, I literally don't know. I just know how many votes there have been, and people have had opinions. We've had like I don't know, 130 or something at this point, which is quite a lot out of the crowdfund. So yeah, I'm excited to find out what the heck color that's going to be, and also excited and hopeful that maybe this is the last thing I'm going to mention because we got to go. I really hope we get the next stretch goal. We get those beautiful calligraphy, initials on the chapters, but something that could help us get there is we have only three slots that people can pledge for to get their short story or gift it to someone else, get a short story critique from David himself. David C. Smith does not do freelance editing and critiques. He does not do that. This is a special thing just for the crowdfund. 3 people can get their short story critiqued by David, who, as we have mentioned, he's literally like taught me new words, and he and he has got a book coming out on writing sword and sorcery, and it's like people are beta reading it right now. His head is in the zone. He's he's in his 70s. He's been doing this since his 20s.
Right.
This is someone like it's special to get him to look at one of your manuscripts. Let me tell you. So I would highly recommend folk have a look at that pledge and give a serious consideration, not just because it's just a couple $100 that could get us those initials. So yeah, all right. Thank you everybody for joining me on the panel. Thank you everybody who's been backing and pledging and sharing and all that good stuff, and letting me keep doing this publishing thing and get David's book out in a big, bold, beautiful way. I gotta run to the ballet, the most sword and sorcery thing of all. All right.
You're gonna see the bear in the little car, Oliver.
Good night, everybody.
Enjoy.
Right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.